Okay, let's do a few about you here to get to know you a little bit better. We call this Phil's Five.
Right
Okay.
on.
No, you're from Wisconsin. Who's your favorite player growing up?
Oh man, yeah. I mean, I grew up watching Brett Favre and then Aaron Rodgers, so that was my whole childhood. Like my four most football memories would be watching Brett Favre play for the Packers and Darrell Bevell, everybody's favorite offensive coordinator, running the show for Wisconsin in the early '90s. So yeah, those are my formative football players, and Michael Jordan in hoops, obviously.
Of course, yeah, of course. Okay, who was your favorite journalist growing up? Was there a guy like you always like sort of like not like a mentor, but somebody that you just love to read all the time?
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton. Like in Wisconsin, I always read Bob McGinn from the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, the late Tom Mulhern at the Wisconsin State Journal. Not only did a great job covering Wisconsin, but then like when I got to college, he was still on the beat, and he just like covering football, Wisconsin football for the student newspaper, and getting to watch Tom Mulhern. Tom Oates was a columnist there. Jeff Petrikis worked for the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, just retired a few months ago. Like having the ability, like you learn a lot doing the job, but then like the ability to watch people do the job for real, I think you just soak up a lot of that. And so when I was a kid, I couldn't, you can't like hold the newspaper all the way open. So I would put it on the ground, and then I would lay on the floor in our house, and I would like read the sports section, like from laying down. So always those guys. And then there's we could talk about this for quite a while, but like
Yeah.
but Wright Thompson, I mean, like there's nobody that does it better sports wise than Wright Thompson. And so there was stuff I read of his in college where I was just like, how do you do that?
Yeah,
Chris
yeah.
Jones used to write for Esquire, like Wright Thompson, Chris Jones, some of these guys that did the long form stuff. You would read them and be like, I'll never be able to put words together like that, but it makes me want to like at least maybe try.
Yeah, that's an inspiration. Yeah, no,
Yeah,
that's awesome.
totally.
So you knew you wanted to do this from a very early age.
I had interest in it from a young age. I didn't know for sure. I came like 5 weeks probably from going to law school. And so I was a journalism major. I worked for the student newspaper. I also was political science. I thought about going to law school. I thought about doing a bunch of different stuff. I actually didn't. I mean, I worked at the Wisconsin State Pension Fund for a couple years after I graduated from college, and so there was no guarantee. But I always had the. I was blogging like for a friend, and I covering Wisconsin hoops, and it turned out that it was one of those years, 14 or 15, when they went to the Final Four. And every time I would go over to I'd like get done with my actual job, and I would go. My apartment was through the parking lot from the Kohl Center, and I would go to the Kohl Center and just like cover hoops for free just to do it. I thought it was like, oh, I'll just scratch the itch. And instead I like kept doing it and kept doing it. And I just kept thinking like, now this isn't scratching the itch really. This is just like, I sort of feel like I want to try to figure out a way to actually do this. And so 10 years
Nice.
later, we're still going.
Yeah, sometimes it's just like some magic there, and you're like, "This is special," and you get that feeling. The next one here is who's your favorite player to cover? Like I know you've covered a lot of different teams here. Your favorite player to cover?
Yeah, that's a good question. Let's see. I mean, I think I always like covering offensive linemen because most of the time they're among the smartest guys on the team. Like when I covered Wisconsin in college, there was a lot. I mean, it was like Travis Frederick, who ended up playing for a long time for the Cowboys, was an electrical engineer, and you talk to him every week, and he would be like comparing football to circuits. He's like, you know how this sort of circuit works? And I was like, no, I don't. And then you like learn something, and then you also talk football. On the current Broncos team, there's a bunch of guys that are really enjoyable to cover. I think Alex Singleton is one of them. He was at Montana State when my first newspaper job was at the Bozeman Daily Chronicle in 2014. I guess I got out there, and Alex was on the team out there, and so. That's one where you have a little bit of scope where it's like, you saw him as a college player. You saw him as a guy who wanted a chance at the NFL and didn't get it and ended up in the CFL and just kept playing and never complained about it, loved it. You know, I got the job. I got a job in Nebraska right before, you know, college basketball teams do the like big glitzy foreign tours. Montana State's foreign tour was to take a bus up to Calgary from Bozeman.
A little different than Italy. Yeah.
A little bit different, yeah. And Alex was playing for the Stampeders in the CFL. And I was going to go up there and cover the foreign tour for Montana State. But I got a job in Nebraska to cover the Cornhuskers in the Big Ten. And he was so mad. He was like, "You're really not going to come to Calgary and watch these Montana State games with me? I'm going to watch the Bobcats. You're not going to be there." And so like to see like going from that to being like a real player and getting a multi-year contract in the NFL, like those are the kind of stories that are all over the place in the NFL, and that are really cool because it's guys that have worked so hard, and you know they may not get $100 million contract, but they're able to set themselves up. And like when you see guys make that work, like that's pretty cool.
Oh, that's awesome. And it's just when you've known him and followed his journey like that from such a young point, that's awesome. That's a great story. Do you have a most memorable interview? Like, have you ever been in a scrum or doing something one-on-one where it's sort of taken a different direction than you were anticipating?
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, I think if you want to go like different direction than anticipating, there weren't many more like stunned looks in the group than in London when Russell just like volunteered that he was doing high knees on the plane. Like it was as if everybody on the field at that moment recognized that was like a viral moment that was just like about to take over. Even though it was probably like 5 a.m. in the U.S. or whatever when it happened. But that was one. I think like, you know, and then you learn stuff too. Like I don't know. Yeah, there was another offensive lineman at Wisconsin, John Moffitt. He was asked on senior day if he liked his offensive line coach, Bob Bosted, who was like a very intense guy, ended up coaching for the Titans for a while. And he was like, "Do I like him?" And he was like, "Well, I don't know. What's one more cattail in the whip?" Not really, but he's taught me a lot, you know, and it was just sort of like one of those where every once in a while when you get a very candid moment, it's memorable because you're like, "Oh yeah, this is good. This will play well."
It sticks out, yeah, for sure. It's interesting you mentioned these offensive linemen. Like you see, like all these former Broncos linemen, they're like now in the media, you know, like Mark Schlereth or Tyler Columbus or Orlando Franklin. Like the list goes on and on. Where these guys just like they know football so well, but you don't like think of them that way that they would like transition to media, but they all do it. Last one for the Phil's Five here. What's an event that you haven't covered yet that you really hope to someday?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, I've never covered a Super Bowl. That would be pretty cool. I've covered a Stanley Cup. It's funny. I cover the NFL. That's my job. I've covered the Stanley Cup Finals. I've covered the NBA Finals. I've not covered a postseason football game. So that would be a good one. I mean, I just think it would be so cool. There's a lot of stuff that would be cool that probably not going to happen at this point. Like, I think it would be cool to cover Formula One. It's such a global sport. You know, some of the World Cup stuff in 26 would be amazing. The Olympics, obviously. But yeah, a little closer to home, like in terms of my actual job duties. I've got 2 of the big 4 checked off. So if I could get a Super Bowl and cover a World Series game someday, I would be pretty happy with that.
Okay, maybe we'll get the playoffs. That one checked maybe hopefully pretty soon here, and then maybe use the Lewis Hamilton angle here and get into some F1 or something.
We're trying to have that be in the works for Vegas. Okay. You know, the Broncos play in Las Vegas the day after that race there. So getting a credential for a Formula One race is not easy.
I can imagine those pre-race, like where you're just like walking through the gallery there, like that would be pretty awesome. So I imagine they don't just let anybody in there.
They don't. We're trying to figure it out, but we'll have to see about that.
Well, you might be knocking out a couple here this year.
Sure.
So that would be awesome.